Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of The Suited Shootist. I'm just going to jump right in on this one because I suspect this is going to be a little bit longer video, but I want to keep it as brief as I can. So I'm going to be talking about pistol dots. It's something that I've been meaning to touch on for a while, and given the recent sort of resurgence on the topic, I figure now's as good a time as any. I will link to some of the other videos below, the one that Ken Hackathorn did on the Wilson Combat channel. John Correa did one as well over at Active Self-Protection. And then this was also the catalyst for a fantastic conversation between my friend John Johnston and Lee Weems on his podcast that is definitely worth a listen. So I'll link all those down below so you can go check them out. And they really are worth a look. So right out the gate, I'm not going to tell you that you need a dot. I'm not going to tell you that you don't need a dot. This isn't which one's better. This is my experiences and what I'm currently getting out of a dot that I wasn't getting as much of with iron sights. So if you are at a stage that you are debating if this is a route that you want to go, I'm hoping that you find this information useful. One disclosure before we start, I am going to be completely dot agnostic here. I don't care about brand. I am a Swamp Fox affiliate, and I am friends with the guy who was, up until recently, their marketing director. So there is a relationship there, but that has no bearing on any of this. Swamp Fox is what I currently have on my carry gun. Several of my peers have also deemed it suitable for concealed carry, but that's not what we're talking about here. If you do want to pick one up, the discount code's down below, but let's jump into it. So I waited longer than I probably should have to switch over to a red dot. And right out the gate, I will tell you, and this is not anything that's going to be a surprise to anybody, it's not going to make you a better shooter. What it is going to do is make some of the information that you can use to become a better shooter more accessible. What do I mean by that? Well, I got a couple of weird things going on. Number one, my eyes, well, I've got great visual acuity. I've got like 20/15 vision. My eyes don't work well together, especially at closer distances. So whenever we're talking about where the front sight is, if I'm having to hold focus there for any extended period of time, that is really straining on my eyes. And so obviously in a defensive circumstance, that's not really relevant, but in all the training and all the practice to become competent and equipped for the defensive situation, that's where this becomes a bit of a challenge. And so the idea of being able to target focus as opposed to sight focus makes my life as a shooter a whole lot easier, just because of how I'm personally wired. Now, there are guys out there like Tim Herron who will definitely say that target focused iron sight shooting is possible. And yeah, I have no doubt that it is. I've played with it a little bit with some of my smaller guns like my J frames and stuff that I don't have dots on, but I was so far down the path that front sight focus is kind of what I default to with irons. And so either way, it's going to be a lot of retraining to kind of break some of those habits. Speaking of breaking habits, you'll also notice that on this dot gun, I got painter's tape across the optic. I'm going to touch on that here in a minute. So one of my challenges was I got wonky eyes, and so front sight focus shooting is more fatiguing for me than some people. The other thing that I got out of switching to a dot, aside from that, was that I forget who I heard this from, but they basically said iron sights whisper to you, whereas an optic shouts. And I don't do all that great with subtlety. So being able to read the dot during the shot process is incredibly useful for me, and I'm able to pick up much more readily inconsistencies that I wasn't catching with iron sights. And so because of that, it makes it a whole lot easier for me to identify and address issues within my shooting. The third part of it, which kind of sections off from that, is because I don't require as much brain power focusing on the alignment of the sights, I'm able to be much more present and aware of what's going on here with my grip and with my trigger. And so again, it makes self-diagnosis a lot easier because I'm not having to put as much focus and attention into sight alignment, which then frees up that brain power to be more aware of what my grip is doing. And those are the major benefits that I personally have gotten out of the red dots. So from a self-diagnostic standpoint, I think it's an immensely useful tool. The challenges are, number one, obviously cost, because you're into a handgun for between $300 and $500. Maybe 6 to 8 if you're going with some of the more expensive ones. And then, the optic is going to be another few $100, and then on top of that, you might have to get the slide milled. So, you're easily into a pistol for upwards of $1,000 in order to get a dot configuration, unless you're doing something that is a little bit more budget oriented, which is not necessarily inappropriate, but again, that's its own conversation. So the cost is one thing, and it's like, do you want to take that gamble? But the other thing, and this is especially true for new shooters, is the dot is a whole lot less forgiving of inconsistency. And so as you are developing your draw stroke, Paul Howe, for example, is fond of presenting the gun muzzle up and literally just dropping the front sight into the rear notch. You have a visual index from here as to where the front sight is, so that is relatively easy. Well, with the dot, you've got just the window of the optic housing to do that. And so unless you're using the ACCS reticle that